So we got 2 hours-ish. So let's see if we can get through it all.
Thank you.
I make marathon classes for no good reason. Let's see if I can do that. Minimize this. Let's see. Let's do that. Sure. Okay. Forgot I added captions. So originally when I taught this class, I had help from Master Thorfinner, who's over in New York, and he has like a whole degree in like classical Chinese and blah blah blah. So he knows Chinese side, and he contributed some explanation on the linguistics. And then Nishigori Mitsumune of Chimeris, he contributed a lot of the Japanese calligraphy details. He knows a lot more about that than I do. And then I just put in memoriam of late Baron Cristoforo of Northshield, because he has done a lot of really good calligraphy and stuff for them up in Northshield, but he passed away a few years back, or a year back. I don't know how much time has passed. It's going by so fast. So basically we're going to go through writing systems, technique and scripts, tools and materials, and then a bunch of examples. So for the writing systems, I'm going to try to keep it minimal and just go through terms and concepts and then how to get translations. So we're working with Chinese, which has simplified and traditional characters. And then we're working with Chinese characters, which are called Hanzi in Chinese, Hanja in Korean, and Kanji in Japanese. And then there's a writing system called Hangul for Korean, and then there's Hiragana and Katakana for Japanese. And then I copied this out of his handout that he made for Chinese calligraphy. It just kind of goes over, if you want to go back over the recording, or if you want me to link this to you, you can read it later. But basically it goes over how they originated out of pictograms as far back as 6,500 BCE. And then eventually evolve into scripts. And so we already have like a solidified script by at least like 100 CE. And it doesn't change too much. What really kind of does change is just cursive handwriting kind of thing. Yeah. And then that's what this branches and splits is for, kind of. I'm just giving it. I'm trying to remember what this is. So like the concept of it is it had as far back as like a couple hundred years BCE, they were already trying to regulate it because there's so many characters. And so like there was a central, like the king was basically like, hey, I just conquered all these different areas and we all use this writing system, but we all have these variants of Chinese characters, so let's make a uniform dictionary kind of thing.
Very helpful.
It doesn't always work because people don't always listen, but they're already attempting to centralize it, basically. Yeah. And that does make it easier if you're, out in the boonies and you get a document from top government and you're like, what does this decree say? Why did they use this weird character? And so yeah, they might not be speaking the same language, but they fun fact, Mandarin is called Mandarin Chinese because Mandarins are officials with square patches. Right. And that is basically the Beijing dialect that was the lingua of all government across all the different Chinese regions. And so there are like hundreds of Chinese different languages, but then if you're a trained official, you would know basic Chinese, and then you would know how to read classical Chinese. So written was generally much easier, but you would know how to at least speak with your government officials.
That's intense.
So yeah, we're talking like multilingual all over the place. And because of that kind of central government system, and the fact that they're, because here's some examples, but the fact that they're like sort of some of them can be pictograms, but very few are ideograms. Most of them like started as that, and then they became, they're still like a symbol. What's the word? logogram kind of works because one could, in classical Chinese, can be a single word. But modern Chinese is not, they're not logograms, they're morphograms. That's the word. We're getting really, you have to get real deep in linguistics to understand any of this really. So morphograms mean it's basically the smallest component of a word that can be written by itself, I guess. If I'm quoting the dictionary correctly. So basically modern Chinese will have like a 2-syllable word that it will be written with 2 syllables, but classical Chinese would have just been written with 1.
Right.
But you can say it with the 2 syllables, but you've written it as 1.
Right.
But then when you're reading it, since it's just 1 syllable, you just read that syllable. So there's like classical, there's classical Chinese that's like spoken, and then there's vernacular Chinese, that kind of thing. And so because that's why when you listen to like Chinese poetry, and it sounds like they're saying very few words and very spaced out, but then when you listen to just a regular speaker, then they're like speaking a mile a minute, it sounds like, because there's a lot more syllables going on.
Right.
But when you're reciting a classical poetry piece, you're saying the fewer syllable version, basically. And so, yeah, because of the ideographic aspect and the logographic aspect, it can cover a bunch of different languages. So that's why Japanese picks it up. That's why Korean picks it up. That's why Vietnam picks it up. And I think Ryukyu and probably the diaspora in like Malaysia and like other Southeast Asia areas, they're all using that. And then Mongolian. That's what I was like, wait a minute. Mongolian also picks it up at some points, and then they switch to their own, and then they ask a Tibetan priest to make a different one, and then they use that one for a while. And so, Mongolian's just kind of all over the place. It all is kind of compatible because they're all over the place. So they have like, so they have kind of like a bunch of different options. So here you can see how katakana came from Chinese characters. So in each block, on the left is the katakana option, and on the right is like the piece of the character that they pulled it from. And usually the character that they pulled it from sounds like that syllable.
Okay.
So they pulled the ear radical from that one to make the ah sound, because the whole character generally sounded like ah. And so that's how that works for katakana. And that came over with Buddhist texts. So I think 6th century is probably the solid point on that. And it came over by trading Buddhist texts with Koreans, and then they brought Buddhism to Japan around that time. And this was like kind of, I think the running theory, the scholarly theory is that it was a Korean shorthand that they were using, and then they just kind of picked up and elaborated on it to use for shorthand as well. And so that's why, like at this time, or even later, when you're looking at like name documents and stuff, they'll have a kanji and then they'll spell it out with katakana to the right side, and not hiragana, even if it is like a Japanese pronunciation, they're still using katakana because they're just phoneticizing the kanji right next to it. And then hiragana is a different syllabary entirely. Oh, and they're syllabaries because they're a consonant and a vowel, and they represent the sound of a single syllable rather than a letter and a consonant and a vowel kind of thing. So they're called a syllabary rather than an alphabet. And hiragana is also a syllabary, and it was formed instead of grabbing one element. Hiragana was formed as like a cursive version of, like they took the cursive version of these characters and then simplified it even more. So you can see the main character in regular regular script on top, and then the cursive script below that, and then the hiragana end result below that. And this is also where you might have heard the word hentai gana, and that is like the old unused, the like estranged gana, basically. So it's a different kanji from the other hentai. But so hiragana, or it is hentai gana, but hentai gana are basically the ones the government has decided, we don't need duplicates, so here you go. This is designated as now a hentai gana. And so there are way more than these. So like there's multiple kanji that make the same sound, and so you would just kind of use whatever kanji you remember at first.
That's fair.
To like, or like whatever your teacher taught you in grade school kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so only like in the 1800s did the Japanese government been like, okay, we gotta increase literacy, guys. So we gotta make sure we all know the cursive, like one hiragana system. So they basically like collected them all and then like eliminated all the duplicates, and they chose like the easiest to write or something. I don't know the exact selection process, but basically that's the theory. So like when you take modern Japanese and you learn hiragana, that's like vastly slimmed down from what historical hiragana is. Yeah, but I don't know enough to like, I don't want to just really, you wouldn't want to just willy-nilly like switch out different art, like retired hiragana, because maybe it doesn't make sense in that context and I don't have any idea. So just, it's fine to just use modern hiragana, but just know that there was many at one point. And like even, let's see if I think this, like this one right here is a retired one. So this is the sound ye, Y-E is how we would romanize it. Yeah, because we know.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
remember that.
no,
one.
that's W, that's technically W-E, but it's just kind of a w, like an A sound with a silent W. Kind of like wo, it's just O.
Yeah.
So A is, I know she's taking Japanese, that's why. You're like, huh? What is this? So anyway, yeah, basically that is a retired one that no one uses anymore. And fun fact about hiragana, it's not like we have an alphabet song we sing and then we know things go in that order. There's an alphabet song for hiragana for Japanese as well, but it's a poem called Iroha. And it uses, it's like a pun play kind of poem, and it uses each sound in the Japanese language once, kind of thing. And so so it's a poem and it means words, but the order of that poem is historically what the alphabet ordering system was. They just use that poem to order stuff alphabetically, basically.
They like their puns.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's Hangul. Hangul came in, so Korea had a similar situation where they were using Chinese characters to pronounce, to phoneticize out Korean words. And so they would just take a word, a kanji or a hanja that meant, it didn't necessarily matter what it meant, but as long as it sounded, it made this sound sort of in Chinese and in Korean. So like okay, so that hanja is how we'll write the syllable han or something. So like this up here is han gul, and then this is it in hangul. So this is hangul, but the hangul system is actually an alphabet. So this is a consonant, this is a vowel, and this is another consonant, and then they block it into squares. So each square is a syllable. And King Sejong the Great was super amazing. He's like the one character, the one historical figure that I would want to at least like talk with to just fathom how big his brain was. Because he basically he wanted to increase literacy, and he was like, this is ridiculous that we don't have some sort of phonetic writing system for our language. So why don't we take some inspo from what the Tibetans were doing by making our character shapes match the tongue shape we're doing.
Yeah.
And so like technically that's like where some of like it what came from, and then other parts of it were just kind of simplified versions of character radicals that already existed. Radicals meaning parts of a Chinese character. And so he did that early Joseon, 1443 is like the year they designate that as, and they have like Hangul Day, and like there's a national holiday for it and all that. And but anyway, so he basically made up this system with all his nerd scholar buddies, and then they printed out all these like how to use it books, and then they would put Hanja and then the Hangul and what the Hangul would be for that Hanja or for specific words. And so that's what this book is on the screen, is one of those early like mass printed, here's how to read Hangul books that they issued once they finished the system. But people suck, and they thought, we'll just we spent all these years and money tutoring our sons to read this really hard to read language, so that's a nasty peasant language.
Of course they did.
So peasants could read now. And so they would issue decrees in Hangul, and peasants would be able to read like, oh, look, there's a wanted poster, or like, oh, that poster says, don't try to come back through the gate past sunset or something, that kind of thing. And so nobles would use it to write to their servants, and nobles and women would use it. Women were allowed to learn that. But I mean, some women were like, their dads were perfectly fine with them learning characters, and so some noble women did have that leisure, but mostly it was also regarded as a women's language. So, which is also, fun fact, what hiragana was considered. Hiragana was considered that lowly women's language for a couple hundred years, until saucy men writing poetry wanted to use it because it was easier to make puns in, and so so they started picking it up, and then it was okay for men to do it. But basically the men who started doing it first were like actors and like lowly class men. And so Hangul, it's super cool. So Romanizations are the process of converting sounds from one of these languages into English. And so we have romanization systems for modern languages into modern English. We do not have necessarily romanization systems for the historic languages. So that's one of the issues you'll get with like using Hanja, because the Hanja have existed for thousands of years, but the way you would have said it at a certain point in history would have changed, because you can look at it and read it and then know the word, because the same people are learning the same characters over time, but like you wouldn't have been able to necessarily understood the speaking of someone 500 years ago. So that's a hard hurdle for people to get over sometimes, and so heralds have an issue with this a lot because no one understands how these languages work. But basically, so romanization is us looking at a character, looking up in a dictionary how that character is spoken modernly, and then and then those dictionaries having the romanization phonetics, the Latin alphabet phonetics in the dictionary, and then we just use it. Because it doesn't quite exist yet to a very solid romanization system for every single century and every single location that we're using, when all of the documents are in this perfectly readable script already. So there's not like a big need to have like necessarily romanization systems for Chinese from 300 CE.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so Chinese scholars and same for Japanese and Korean, like they're all working on like getting phonetic systems for their own languages, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're putting it into English. And that was just the spiel right there. If you're interested in classical Chinese, classical Chinese is like very, I heard someone say once and it stuck with me. Like if you imagine Japanese, have you all seen what Japanese looks like as text?
Mhm.
Okay, so there's like a kanji, and then there's some hiragana, and then there's a period, and then there's like a couple more kanji, and like the kanji are usually like the nouns or like the start of the verb, and then the hiragana are like the extra phonetics. And so someone once said, classical Chinese is essentially if you took a Japanese sentence and like just left the kanji. So like you're getting a verb in there, you're getting a noun in there. Sometimes there's characters that indicate like grammatical things, like the end of a sentence or the verb to be, or you know, some basic stuff that would kind of indicate where the end of the sentence is, but there's no punctuation in classical Chinese. And so most of the regions are using either like actual classical Chinese because they would have understood it because they would have either gone to Beijing and studied it and then came back to their home country, or they're working with China as a central power anyway. So they would have basically have known how to read classical Chinese if you're a fully educated nobleman. And then, oh, okay. Oh, I think this did this to me last time I taught this class and I forgot. So anyway, let's see if I can just skip this one. And then, so we're getting into translations, which if I can, is it this one? This one. Let's see, will it let me? I totally forgot I did this. Okay, that's happy. It just doesn't like this slide. Okay. So dictionaries, I brought in, they're in my car, never mind. But I brought dictionaries if you wanted to give it a go. But basically the way dictionaries work for Hanja or Hanzi or Kanji, they're all the same thing. They all mean Chinese character. Basically you have all the characters in a dictionary, and the way you look it up is you know how to write it, right? You gotta know how to write it. And so you count how many strokes are in a character, and you got to know what the radical is, the main radical of the character. So like,
I am. Okay.
let me see if okay, let's see if it boots me out of this one. But see this, oh yeah, it does. Okay, it just hates this slide. So this one here, the 3 dots on the left side would be the radical. Gotcha. And that's the radical for water. For no good reason. When this is kind of a slightly stylized cursive version, so it looks like 3 lines make river, yeah. So it's a very simplified radical for water. And so you would look up this character by going, okay, we're going to, so radical, the radical for water is 3 strokes, so it's probably 3rd down the line. So I look for that section for all the water radical characters, and then I count, okay, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then if we add the other 2, that's 14 strokes. So you would go to the number 14 section of the water radical in the dictionary, and then you would just look until you find it. So that's how dictionaries work, and that's kind of how they've worked for hundreds of years. So if you ever need to look up something in a Chinese character dictionary for any language, that should be how that section is structured. And then there's like always like a section in the back nowadays that has like the pinyin version. So if you know the pinyin or like the romanization in the language you're looking up, you should be able to find it. There should be 2 sections. There's always like a radical lookup option and then like the romanization option if you're using the dictionary. Okay, past this one again. Nope. Okay. So we'll start here. So translators. I know in the SCA, a lot of people, okay, it doesn't like that one either. In the SCA, people like matching persona to scrolls, and that's great. You can do that. You do not need to know the language to do that. You could just do it in English.
Yeah.
Some people, and then, but if you really want to, there are translators out there. You can either use a translation app, which is probably the last resort, or you can ask on the SEA Scribble groups, because I know there's quite a few people in there, or you could ask in the regional specific groups for translators. And then I run a Discord that has like all of them in there, and I know how to track them down if you need them, kind of thing. What I've been doing for scrolls, since I'm not a fluent Japanese speaker, but I know how to pick out kanji. And so what I've been doing is taking period Japanese edicts, and then they have an English translation. I think it's Princeton that has this collection. And I can pull it up, but it's like Komonjo or something. It's the Princeton Komonjo collection. And they have all these like government documents that are like, you did great in battle. So if you ever, here's my IOU, if you ever need something in court, kind of thing. And like it's an official piece of paper that they would then keep folded up in a safe in their house. And so if they ever needed to do something politically, they could then pull out that letter, and they could check handwriting on someone, and verify that it was written by that person, and then, you know, use it in court. And so it lists like, this is the scribe that wrote this letter down. This is the officiating noble, and like issuing this decree, and like, so it's got like all that language in there that we use. And so I just take the kanji and like take out the names, put in the other names, and then I'm like, yay, I didn't have to translate anything. So it helps to like at least know what kanji is like relating to, because at least that website, it has the original, which is like in cursive, it's hard to read. Then they have like the typeset version, and then they have a modern, no, they just have the typeset version, so you can like copy paste text and then basically plug each one into a dictionary, because it's Google Translate is going to hate it. So you can like plug each one into a dictionary and be like, okay, so this is a name, and then okay, this one is a verb. I need that verb, so we're leaving that alone. We're switching up the name. And so that's how I've been doing it, and it's not that bad. It's actually pretty great, and I don't have to bother anyone. And then I'm also already in like basically middle Japanese, so that's how I've been doing stuff. Let's see if it likes this. Yay! Maybe yay! Okay, so my short list is basically Master Thorfinner out of East Kingdom. Minamoto no Hideaki is out of Lahak. And then Ii Katsumori is out of the West, because he's in Thailand, technically. And then Wonchol is, I think he's also in East Kingdom, but he's kind of like, he's an admin of the SEA Korea Facebook group. If you're in that and you need Korean, and he'll translate for you, but he's not really an active Scottian anymore. And then Anna Elizabeth Dolid is on most of the Scribble groups, and I think in like the diversity group. So like if you ask in any of those groups, you can probably find her. She can do Japanese because she grew up in Japan, and then she's been researching into Balayan, which is Malaysian.
That's what I was just gonna say. I was like, oh.
I'm just trying to, because she's Malaysian. She's like half, or no, Filipino. Yeah. She's Filipino. So she's researching into the medieval language that would have been spoken in the Philippines. So I think that is for Bobby. I think she's Filipino, not Malaysian. Don't quote me. But she can do both those if you ever needed a Filipino scroll. And then I have some people who are working on speaking Okinawan, and then other people that can do Mongolian. So Okinawan will be Ryukyu. And then alternatives. A good suggestion that I still have not seen anyone really do, because I always try to make it so personalized they can't do the English ever, is sticking a poem in there. And just practice with poems, and then do like a title panel in kanji or something, and then do some art, and then do a poem in that language that's a period poem, and you can get the text for that and practice the calligraphy on that, and you don't have to translate anything, it's just a lovely poem, and then you can just do the English right after that. So like you don't have to like do all the translation if you don't want to. And then I've already ran you guys through that. Basically, don't use hack hands. They're nasty.
Don't do what?
Hack hands, faux hands, or basically people, it's a very Scottian thing to do this, but they wanted the scroll to match so badly that they spent all this time making an alphabet script that looks like Japanese or Chinese. And it's not great. And so like, and some of them are so good, you can like look at it and be like,
Then when you actually,
but then when you actually try to read it, you're like, oh wait, that's supposed to be English. And
wow.
it's just, it grinds my gears.
Is that something that people still are doing?
Yes.
Like,
because people don't know.
because like I feel like that would have been a thing when the SDA started.
Oh yeah. So that's when a lot of them were made, was like early 2000s
Yeah.
and stuff. But like these days, to make a hack hand look good, you would basically have to study the same amount of time
right.
to learn hiragana. And you
Right.
can just do a scroll in hiragana, because hiragana only scrolls are period.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it
not expect that to still
grinds
be a
my
problem.
gears, and it's definitely still a thing. And they do it for other non-English Latin scripts as well. But I mostly see these, so yeah. And I have a couple examples that are like that, so I'll show you, because they were good otherwise. So techniques and scripts. Stroke order is important, because that's what you need to know to make the cursive look good. So like if you're just doing regular script, you can kind of get away with, which is fine. Regular script is period, and documents were supposed to be written clearly. But like if you're trying to do like a Japanese one, those are generally done in semi-cursive. So you'd have to make the cursive jumps mentally. You have to know where your hand's going and what stroke order it should be in, kind of thing. So that's why stroke order is important. And generally the rule is top to bottom first. So like these two images, the black is the very first stroke, and then the lightest red is the very last stroke. So on the left-hand one, you start at the top, and then you go right, and then you go down, and then do all the lines across, and then you do the middle line last. And then on the right, you would do the piece on the left first, and then you would go top down on the one on the right, because it's second. So there's rules to this. And your calligraphy teachers will get on your ass. So here's a little animated GIF of Yong, or A, or Yong in Korean. I probably said the Chinese one wrong because I can't do tones, but basically it's considered the perfect character to practice with, because it has all the elements. It's got like a right hook, it's got a left hook, or it's got a line with a hook on the tip, and then it has a right angle, and then it's got like basically all the parts right there. They all have names, and so you don't have to memorize the names of each stroke, but like if you're taking a class in that language, your calligraphy teacher would be coming over and be like, man, your Tian sucks. You need to redo that dot. I think Tian, it says Dien, I have to do the hand to visualize the tones. But anyway,
Yes.
but in Japanese, that's just like 10. It's just Ten, no necessarily tonal. Oh, interesting thing, I read that Korean used to be tonal, like basically in period for us. It used to have tones as well. So glad I don't have to deal with that. It's past my brain capacity.
Sounds so hard. So hard.
Okay, so then here's my visual on knowing the stroke order can help you with A, reading the cursives, and B, enacting the cursives. So on the left is the still photo of the animated one on the left, but the animated one you can see which order it goes in, and then you can see how the scribbles became that, or that became the scribbles. And if you're doing, basically, if you're doing an artsy fartsy cursive right, no one should be able to read you.
Basically, yeah.
And even today, no one can read the master's handwriting. Brush use. This is important because it's like in every book. You're holding the brush up and down like this, like you're not using your wrist. Your base of contact is here, and so you're not smearing anything. A. And B, you could use your whole arm then and have very energetic, like large calligraphy things. So that's important. And then holding it straight up and down so you can like apply pressure right. So all the calligraphy books show you this.
Is there any big difference in writing between hands? Because I know like the Latin alphabet, like that's a
Well, we're
hand.
writing top down and right to left, which, I mean, I'm assuming there's an equal proportion of left-handed and right-handed people in Asia as well. So I don't think it matters because we're keeping our arm off the paper anyway. So, and the stroke order should be the same no matter what. So hopefully it does kind of negate that. Here's a quick go through of different types of script. Bone script is the earliest. It was carved on bone. That's why it's called bone script. And then bronze script was cast bronze version of the bone script characters. And it was kind of happening contemporary to the bone script. And then the bronze script is kind of synonymous with the seal script. It just, seal script sticks longer because it was used on seals much longer than they were casting it into bronze. So basically, depending on what the object is you're talking about. If you're talking about a bronze ritual vessel tripod, I forget the name, then, and it had characters on it, you would probably just say, oh yeah, that's bronze script. And then seal script would be, if it's, oh yeah, that's carved onto a seal that I'm stamping with, so it's seal script. and that's probably not necessarily what they would have called it at the time, but that's what we know it as now. Clerical script is the thick, chunky one that goes really wide.
Yes.
And that was like the first where we've moved from scratching it into things to brushing it onto things. And so there's some really cool like transitional seal script, clerical script stuff out there where they're like writing it they're writing the seal script characters, but with a brush on paper. And then it becomes shorthand. Like this was a clerical shorthand, and people were like, ew, that's a bastardization of our beautiful characters. You can't use that cursive. And then repeat that same argument every time a new script comes out.
Of course, naturally.
Because everyone's just like, that's terrible. Why don't you do it the right way? And so, yeah, then we have clerical script is just basically short, like narrow this way, and then wide. And then semi-cursive is just, I don't know why they put that there, but regular script is on the far right, and regular script came out of clerical script. And then it's called regular script or standard script because they centralized it. That's the one that they were like, okay, get your act together. We have to have a readable dictionary so we're all literate enough to conduct government.
Yes.
And then the rest is just, how fancy are you? And here's some pictures of it. I'll try to zoom through this. What time is it? Okay. We've got an hour and 15 minutes. We're good. So here's some pictures of historical scripts. The one on the right is that kind of transitional. that I was talking about, because that's on a really old piece of silk, if I'm remembering correctly. So these are like the two on the left are carved, and then someone took an ink rubbing of it, which is like putting a piece of paper on the stone and then rubbing ink to get the negative. And but on the right is some extant stuff from some Eastern Han Dynasty tombs, I think, where it's on silk, but it's still like script, and we're not like uniform yet. Here's the clerical script. Oh, it's also called square script because it's chunky. And yeah, it came a little later, but most of this evolution, like I said, happened like so long ago that like you're safe. You're safe to use any of them basically. But what people did do, and I have the books if we want to look at them later, if you aren't going to another class, but I brought a couple practice books that showed different famous calligraphers' handwritings, because basically that's what you would do. If someone ended up getting really famous for his calligraphy, he could open like a scribal shop basically, and people would have him write stuff. And also famous calligraphers would do their version of a 1,000-character book, which is literally just 1,000 characters one at a time. And he would do his version of each character, and then someone would carve it into a stone, a stele, and then I think that's how you say it, and then stick it in like a public square somewhere. And so if someone really wanted to copy his handwriting, they could just go get ink rubbing of his handwriting and then take it home and then practice it.
That's awesome.
And kind of like, you know, when you're in middle school, you're trying to figure out your favorite handwriting.
Yeah.
So you would just pick your favorite calligrapher and then emulate their style.
I love that.
And so the one I have in the middle there is my favorite, that gold sutra script right there. I think that's the prettiest in my opinion. But on the left, it's like really nice and minimal. Yeah. Looks like real easy to pick up kind of thing. And then on the right is kind of like a similar one too. But I just want that. I want that. I don't know how to get there, but I want it. And then here's some of the semi-cursives. And yeah, you can already tell they're getting hard to read. And these are just the semi-cursives. So. Yeah. And it's hard to get semi-cursive to look right. You literally will look like some kind of 2-year-old if you try it and like don't have a lot of practice behind it. So I don't try it very often. I'm still working on the regular script. Another option you could do if you're doing a scroll, and I haven't seen anyone do it, but a lot of people who don't know how the scripts work and they're trying to do a scroll in Chinese fast, they'll copy a type font from the computer, and it just looks like a type font. But there's woodblock script specifically that is kind of similar to the type font script, and it was because we had started to get movable type by this point. So if you wanted to do something that specifically looked like a printed book, that would then be an accurate kind of hand to use. But if you're just writing something with a brush, your handwriting would not look like this. Right. But I haven't seen anyone go that far, go that deep down the hole.
Yes, I was gonna say.
So same for Koreans. As you might know, they had the first movable type with little brass or bronze casts for each character kind of thing, and then they could plug it in and then print the page, and yeah. And then they also did carved wood blocks like the last page, and they did that so there's like the wood block print for Hangul, and then there's also the regular gorgeous cursive that is actually carved in the printing. And yes, this is mostly post-period, but it is very tail end period if you wanted to go down that very difficult rabbit hole. So here's just basically an example of Gothic typeface that would not be appropriate, essentially, because these are just like Microsoft era only. And then like especially or round stuff would also be not great. So this is just the same poem in all 3 scripts. And here's some of those steles I was talking about. And then sometimes, since they're getting worn away from the weather, we have only ink rubbings that someone took from like a century ago to know what some of them said. And these are also, they weren't just 1,000 character scripts from famous calligraphers, like that's a really bougie thing, I think. But they were also like to record histories and stuff like that. And then for practicing, again, the poem idea or practicing like a single character, like at a time, like that's a perfectly acceptable art piece, would be to do one, have like a piece of paper and then just practice one character until you get that one character down. And then, or just like a 4-character quatrain, you can practice that because those are done on calligraphy things all the time. And then my calligraphy teacher told me bamboo because bamboo has like that line that imitate in that line, she said, and the leaves imitate like some of those diagonal strokes and like the horizontal strokes and stuff like that. So like, if you want, just do ink only art and then practice your pressure and your saturation and stuff like that, because you have to like you have to add more water to make it lighter gray and like know when your brush is loaded up. So basically it's good practice, even if you're not doing characters at all. More, so here's the 1,000 character classic I mentioned. There's also the 3-character classic. Yes, quite literally. So, so that's what like kids today use when they're in elementary school in China. They'll just get a 3-character classic workbook in their calligraphy class, and they'll practice that over and over and over again until they're sick of it. And then same for the 1,000 character classic is like more advanced, and that's kind of what you would do as an adult. Like you would get like a workbook of some calligrapher's 1,000 character classic that you like, and then practice that over and over again. And they make like copybooks, so that up there at the top, see how it's like faded and it has like the characters underneath it. That's because they printed it underneath, and then you're supposed to fill in over top of it and trace it. So they offer those, and you go to like AliExpress.
Because they have all on AliExpress.
Yeah. And it just, you have to look for what calligrapher you want, basically, to see what character, what style you want to practice. Okay, tools and materials. There's this phrase, it's a 4-character quatrain because we love those. It's called in English, the 4 treasures of the study. And the 4 that it's referencing are ink, brush, paper, and then an inkstone. Now, I've added to that.
Yes.
I have other tools down there. Other tools is my last one. So basically, you want the brush. You either want an inkstone and ink stick, or you want liquid ink. You do not need the inkstone if you're using liquid ink. You just need like a bowl or something. You need paper. You can order a seal stamp if you want, but it's not necessary. And then mounting tools if you want to go that deep. And then paint is also an option, which is like a watercolor. So here's some brushes. These are just some modern ones you can get. The Japanese ones are like the thick bamboo one, and then like Chinese and Korean ones are the thinner ones. But if you buy kits, the thinner ones are usually always bamboo anyway. But Japanese ones specifically, they have like that black tip generally. I don't know why they've developed that way, but they have. But that's how you can tell at a glance, like if you're looking online. If you don't know if you're at a Japanese calligraphy store or a Chinese calligraphy store, that's generally how you would tell. So like if you go to Daiso in Japan, you would get the straight ones.
Gotcha.
But if you go to Amazon, you're probably going to get the Chinese made ones. And they can come in big kits like that. Here's what the ink sticks look like. They're vertical, and like you can get they're from calligraphy stores, you can get aged ink sticks. Like, I guess it's a thing you give your grandpa if your grandpa's really traditional. You might want to get him like an ink stick that claims it's from like the 70s or something, like it's sat in storage for 30 years kind of thing. I don't know why that makes a difference, but Apparently they're more premium and they charge you more for them. But you can get brand new ones perfectly fine. And then there's colored ink, which is, I haven't quite figured out the difference. Not the difference, but like when you use colored ink versus when you use watercolor. So like I don't know exactly when you flip or what you, but they sell like the rainbow kits of the rainbow ink sticks. And I'm just like, what would I use these for? But you can if you want. Yeah. Or you can just, and then to get the ink stick into ink, you would need an ink stone to grind it on. And so you would just stick it upright like this graphic here. You have the ink sticks right here in the base of the dish, the ink stone. And modern ones kind of have a well bit where you can like put the water in and let it settle here. And then as you grind it, it'll drain down into the water. And then if you need to get the stick wet more, you can just dip it in and then bring it back up and grind up here. And that's how you would bury it. But this one's a turtle and I thought it was cute. Basically his shell comes off and the stone's in the middle. So you lift that's his lid. And then this one's a Japanese one shaped like a koto, an instrument. And then this one, I just plopped that in there yesterday. I found it when I was looking through the Jung, I think I spelled that wrong. I think it was the Jonggi Museum. Maybe I'll check. But anyway, did I copy paste that? I don't know. Well, I'll check my sources later. But basically, it's a Korean one. I don't know why I put China on there, but it's just got like a pedestal and then it's a circle disc in the middle, so it wouldn't have the dip like the parallel ones or the long ones would. And then you can just get liquid ink. Very, very easy. This here is particularly a washer bowl. So there's like specific bowls for calligraphy that you can nerd about like me and to try to find one. But basically it's got that lip so that as you're brushing off, it like drains it back in more safely, I guess.
So you don't make a mess.
In theory. And then here, this like vermilion color, it's like a bright orange, but I think they refer to it as red in Japanese. But basically, if you're in a Japanese calligraphy class, your teacher would use the orange and you would practice with the black ink. So like it's kind of like a signifier of this is the proper way to do it. And I think it has something to do with the emperor theoretically wrote with vermilion ink. So I think that's what it's kind of coming from. But I don't know why it's used in Japanese calligraphy classrooms and not Korean or other ones. But so in Japan, when you're in elementary school and you're in your calligraphy class, your teacher will crack out the orange ink. So I've got like some copies of like my name from my Japanese classes where the teacher gave it to me in orange. But I bought one because I saw it at a store once, but I haven't, oops, I hit it twice. So yeah. Oh, and the gold ink, you might have seen it on Amazon and a lot of people use it for other calligraphy things, European calligraphy things, but it's basically a mica powder in some sort of modern ink liquid, but that would have been essentially period because the period gold ink was gold ground to a powder and then put into the adhesive liquid basically. So close enough. I'm not gonna buy gold and grind it down, and
Yeah.
I'm not in that deep. Paper options. People think rice paper, which is cheaper, and you can get it in bulk, but they almost always get plain rice paper when you could get floral rice paper or unbleached paper here with like all the little filaments showing through. And then this is more like practice paper, and then you can get fancy colored paper with gold flakes in it. So like you have so many options, but people will just be like, "Oh, I got some rice paper off Amazon," and I'm like, but it is slightly anachronistic because what would have been used for full-on painting things. So like the edict documents, yeah, those would have been on paper or silk sometimes, but mostly paper. But then the paintings with like the full-on scroll mounted thing with like poetry at the bottom, or even like a hand scroll, that would have been silk. So we're already being anachronistic by using paper ones. And modern ones that you can make or get that are pre-made, pre-mounted silk things, usually they have paper in the middle too anyway already. So, but the thing is, the technique I've found is hard to, the technique that you would use on the silk kind of messes up and oversaturates on the paper. So I'll have to fork out the dough and get the sized silk. So usually at calligraphy stores, they will sell like rolls of like it's like a brownish kind of tan color because it's already got the sizing on it so that your ink will latch. So, but it's like $50 for like a small roll. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, do I want to do that for just an AOA that's due 2 weeks from now? No. Seal stamps. I mostly mention these because everyone really likes them. They think it looks like a maker's mark, which it kind of can be. There was like famous art studios where they would denote that it was their work by stamping it, but mostly it's like a collector's thing. And so if it was in the Imperial Palace collection, it would be stamped with an Imperial Palace seal or blah, 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 blah. But like there is some, I think, like I said, the edicts on the Japanese side were just like handwritten letters, but like on the Chinese and Korean side, you would have maybe had like the big official seal. That means it was the decree. My friend Thorfiner says Chinese edicts are hella extra. So I'm assuming that's where that would come out. But I don't quite know where Korean falls on that scale, I think. So basically, so I have, you can order these online. You can order the blanks and then carve them yourself. You can get a carving kit and get into that. Some people do them with like wood. I forget the type of wood, but there's soap wood? No, some kind of wood where it's really easy to carve and it gets a nice clean line. And so this is Nishigori's attempt at a seal. That's his slide. And this is these are Nishigori's pictures of his ANS project for mounting a scroll. So he did a painting on silk. And so this is another point where you have to decide where you're going to cut cut how accurate your scrolls are, because if for SCA scrolls, we usually just hand out a piece of paper. We don't hand out the frame. But in people's minds, when they think like Asian scroll, they think it needs to be fully framed, fully mounted, basically, into that scroll. And that's a lot of work. And you don't need to do that. So you could just hand someone the paper bit and then, or get it in a frame that you have laying around. But what a lot of people try to do, and then it ends up looking kind of halfway decent, is some kind of dowel rod and then fabric they had in their stash situation. But they're just like gluing it, or you know, they're not necessarily treating it in the same way that this would be treated. So this is his ANS project. He got like proper silk. He basically used like a rice flour paste with some alkaline powder. I can't remember the word. Sure, we'll go with that word. Basically, you make the paste and you turn your painting upside down so the ink is downward on the table, and you get the whole thing wet. You soak it. So that is where using Chinese watercolors or Asian watercolors is very, very important, because it is water resistant once it's dried. So if you're going at it from the front, it'll smudge still. But if you have it flipped over and facing down and you apply the mounting from the back, then you're generally good. It'll stay safe. And there's a couple videos on YouTube from Blue Heron Arts, is the guy out of California that is basically the entire English-speaking world's information on this. The rest of it's all in either other languages or not available on YouTube. So you can watch his videos to figure it out. But basically, and Nishigori showed me like one Japanese documentary on a Japanese style mounting process. But yeah, it's called wet mounting because you're mounting it wet. And there is a modern alternative that's like an iron-on mounting, where it's just like a silicone backing. You just flip your painting over, slap it down, iron it, and bam, it's attached. But you still need to then buy that specific mounting paper or that specific silk with the silicone backing from Blue Heron Arts.
Right, naturally.
There is some on AliExpress too, but I would rather get the actual silk and then like kind of dabble with the effect. But yeah, so that's where I brought up the paint, because if you use, and he says this all the time in his videos, is basically do not use Western paints if you're going to wet mount it, because they will bleed and then you'll have ruined your whole thing. So yeah, you would need to get some sort of East Asian watercolor. Now I think Japanese has like those more like those little dish things where it's dried and then you just get it wet. But then these are more like, how do you say the word? Gouache?
Gosh.
Yes, and so these are more gouache texture where you just, you can put it out and then if you leave the cap off, it dries up, kind of thing. Other things, here's those washer bowls on the left. You'll see them in museums sometimes. So these are, the lower one is a period one, I believe. And then the top one is just like a modern one. But it's got that rim, but they're basically that shallow bowl shape. And they are called specifically brush rinsing bowls. And then water mats is the thing on the bottom left. You can get those to practice on. I would have brought some, but I didn't think we would get to the, oh, we do have a chat up here, don't we? Oh, just record it. Okay, that was forever ago. But basically, yeah, it's great to practice. You just get they usually come with like a brush and like that little thing it's sitting on, like a little plastic water dish with that's also a brush holder, a brush rest. Mm-hmm. And a lot of brush rests also can double as like chopstick rests. So you'll kind of see them in the same section in some stores. So here's paperweights. These down here are the brush rests. They're like these little cute little statue thingies. And then you can just set your brush in them so the ink doesn't roll all over the table. And then these up here are the water droppers. And this one's like shaped like a crocodile or something. But they all have a hole for the air and then a hole for the water to get out. And then to fill them, you just submerge them in water and then you pick them up. And then the whole point is they drop out a little at a time. So that way you're not flooding your inkwell or your ink stone with water, because you only really need a little bit of water to get started and get a really dark ink out of the ink stick. Yeah, they got brush racks, they got brush rests. They try to get me all the time. And really, I buy so many accessories sometimes. I don't need more, but they're fun and they're cute. So yeah, and I have like a couple trays like that as well, where I just kind of store everything. And there's 5 million things that you could get. I have found, so online, I've said AliExpress, which is the English-facing side of Taobao. So if you can get the characters, if you can get basically a VPN on your phone to show that you're in China, if you can get past the Taobao wall, basically, then you can browse from stores that are only on Taobao and haven't made like an AliExpress page yet. There's some stuff on eBay. There's of course stuff on Amazon, which is like the same stuff, but like sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. And then that Blue Heron Arts.com is that guy out of China, out of California, and he's got a lot of stuff in stock, and I think he does sales sometimes, and he'll even do custom mounting if you want to pay him like $300. So if that gives you an idea of how much process a custom mount is, and so you do not have to custom mount your scrolls. And then in person, you can try to look at groceries.
That's what I was like, travel to a big city and hope.
Basically, Kinokuniya has it, and but that's in Chicago, New York, and California.
Yeah.
So
if you're
maybe one in Houston. I
Yeah.
don't know why Houston, but there's always one in Houston for some reason.
They're wild down.
And then in Columbus, actually, there's a Japan marketplace there that has a Japanese. It's called J Avenue. I don't know if we'll go through that Japanese marketplace in that area, but they have a souvenir store rather than like just a regular grocery store. And that souvenir style store has a small calligraphy section, and they have like the Japanese watercolors and then basic brushes, inkstone, stuff like that. And then sometimes your local Asian grocer can order them in from their guy in Chicago. So if you just go to Chicago, you're good.
Yeah.
But that's what he said last time. He's like, I gotta ask my guy. And I was like, okay, let me know when it's in. And he's like, I don't know when it'll be in. But anyway, so you can try that route, or if you can get to a so like I mentioned dollar stores, not because we have Daisos around here. If you do have a Daiso, you're super lucky. And yes, they should usually have some basic Japanese calligraphy stuff. But dollar stores, especially Dollar Tree, they have like that like 5-pack of little glass bowls that are perfect for putting like your ink in, and then like, or if you're doing like a mass practice, and like you want like a color per bowl. So like dollar stores do have good stuff like that, or like tablecloths, or like a mat cover so you don't get ink. And so, think about that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then I've tried every freaking Asian store on Google in Cleveland, and I could not find anything but like really sad $3 brushes at one store. And I was like, man, these are falling apart in my hands. These are not good enough. So yeah, mostly I've just been buying from online, and then I've been trying to experiment with different stores and hoping I'd get a really good one, but I've only found like kind of mid-tier ones. They still like let loose, even though I like do the whole rinse thing, I'll still lose hairs into my bowl sometimes, or like onto my paper, and I'm like, ah. And so Amazon has beginners kits like that, and they'll have the blank seal stamp. So if you wanted to give it to someone who carves, and have them carve something in there for you. And then they usually have like a stick, the ink stone, tiny little washer brush, a brush rest, and then like a few brushes as an option. So I would say just go buy one of those $20 kits, start with that. I was lucky, and like, those like weird little fan-shaped souvenir boxes that some people get because they went to China in like the 70s. I found like 2 of those at yard sales. I've also found a Japanese calligraphy travel box in like a flea market in Indiana kind of thing. So like, I'm a thrifter, so if you're out and about, you might find one, especially like maybe a couple nice inkstones, but you can get what you get. So you can buy a fresh on you $20 kit and you'll be good. And then those bowls are the Daiso bowl, or the Dollar Tree bowls I was talking about. And then that is a felt mat that they sell sometimes, because I don't know why felt, but felt is what my calligraphy teacher recommended, and the felt is what they sell at calligraphy stores. And then that book on the left is actually really useful. It's in my car, but yeah. And then I would get a practice mat, a water practice mat, because that was super useful to have, but it doesn't help you practice like ink thickness on dryness on brush. And that book is only like $20, and I got it at Barnes & Noble. And then if you're just doing the painting, if you plan on doing scrolls in just English and you just want to practice the painting, there's this book called The Mustard Seed Garden Manual of Painting. And I think basically it's a reprint. We only have it's a book that existed in period, but we only have the illustration plates from like the 1750s. And so if you read like the intro, it'll say, oh, this book is really old, and you're like, oh, great, that's accurate. But then you have to think the illustration plates though got lost. And so we have later illustration plates that are copies of the earlier plates. So yeah, so you can get that, you get the watercolor set, your small bowls, and go ham. It'll show you each like the ways different artists did grass and trees, or like pine trees versus palm trees and deciduous trees and all that stuff, and like how they did people, animals. And so like basically anything you would need is a reference in that book. It's pretty cool, and I have that in my car too if you want to look at it. I really did not go out and get my stuff, did I? I have a holding the brush again. This is because we started at 2, right?
Yeah.
And it was a 2-hour class, so we've got 45 minutes. So another thing, I'm holding the brush, but instead of an illustration, just that. A lot of practice a lot. Exemplars, here we go. This is the more fun part. So I'm gonna go through the historical ones, and then I'll go through SEA ones at the end. Documents, these 2 are pulled from Solveig's edict. I forget what she called it. Komonjo? I think she called it Komonjo class, because it's the word for Japanese edicts. So on the left, you can do it's an example of a petition style where the bullet points are basically that dash, that line, and then they list all of their things they want on their petition, and at the end is all the names of everyone. And then the one on the right was an interesting one that she had. Instead of a seal, they did a whole handprint, which I think is cool. And so totally I want to do that on a scroll one day, but I'd have to have a willing Baron and Baroness or something. Get ready to get your hand messy. And so, yeah, maybe we'll see one day. So documents, here's a close-up of one of them that I use a lot. The little white text, I think, is added in later. But you can see it's just got a very strong calligraphy thing, and they're on that more raw paper, that mulberry paper that's kind of unbleached. So you want fancy paper. You don't have to just do white practice paper. Here is a treatise. So some dude wrote this and then went waxed poetic about it, basically. But this is another format you can do. You can just do title with fancy paper. See, this paper has the little gold, that's probably gold flakes or something fancy at the front. And then this is just regular paper. And it would all be mounted on one scroll that you could roll out and read. So you can format it like that. Wall scrolls, here's pictures of it. This is what a lot of people just default to. And yeah, I don't know if any of you are on that SEA Scribble page or group, but they have, someone posted, the King of the East was a Japanese persona. His county scroll was posted there, and the shape of it was kind of like this, where it was a long piece done this way with art, and that was great. But then they mounted it right here and right here. They just mounted it really close to the painting itself, whereas they should have, to be fully historically accurate, which I know is, what is the word? Pedantic? No, I don't know. Anyway, basically, that's where knowing the full context would help in order to execute it well, because they could have handed him just that, and that would have been gorgeous. And they didn't. If they didn't know how to do it, my general philosophy is don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But anyway, so I included a long ways one, and then I included a couple really the longer ones, and then the 2 flaps at the top are essentially deer scares, fly scares.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but one of the documentaries said, yeah, that's how we've always done it. So because these used to be hung outside, like on the porch kind of thing. So like you would just be sitting on your porch and you'd be like, oh, look at this lovely painting. Especially because if you know Japanese houses and like other, if the house has good airflow, you're gonna be getting good airflow. So your paintings and things that are usually inside might get exposed to outside stuff. So anyway, it's like a fly scare apparently, or a deer scare as well. So as the wind hits it, it smacks, and then it's also is a deer scare essentially. Yeah, so that's a wall scroll. Here's some Nishigori put these in here because this is his shtick, but I think it's more of a Japanese thing to, I think it might have, you might see some similar in Chinese stuff for like Taoism purposes, but basically this is a sutra, or no, a mantra. I can't remember the word exactly because I can't remember, because I know sutras are usually the super long one, but this is basically a phrase, just a single phrase, not like a full text, and then like scrunched together. And then the way that it's put centrally like that, and then like there's different parts of it, and then they have the bits of it within the other bit. Like it's a Buddhism thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen like something like the one on the right before, but like done in
And, like,
embroidery actually. Like
yeah, and then like modern Chinese fantasy stuff is like, oh yeah, this is the superstitious magic
this is
paper.
magic. I don't know. What you're
This is the magic paper talisman. So yeah.
It's like Wuxian's talisman.
It's way-
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially that's what that is, and he does a lot more on that. And I don't really, we've got another picture of it later, I think. So hand scrolls, you can buy them pre-made. They're really long though. Like if I rolled it out, it would probably go from like this wall to that wall. Even if you buy them pre-made, sometimes a little shorter.
Oh, like the
Yeah, especially like the pre-made ones. Like they're only like this, you can get them this narrow, but they'll be long. And you'll have to fill up the whole thing. And otherwise you'll be like, why did I buy this for $20?
yeah.
And so you can get pre-made hand scrolls, but one thing I've done, actually it was for my very first Kingdom scroll, I took a wall scroll I had, took off the ribbon that made it a hanging scroll, and then added a closure strap, and then just turned it sideways.
That's smart.
And I was like, okay,
That works.
because this is, even though it was still pretty wide because it was a wall scroll, you can get narrow wall scrolls and maybe do that, and that way it's only this long instead of this long, and you wouldn't feel bad about not filling up the whole thing. Also, you can do that with bamboo, so that's what the bamboo slot things are for. And you can buy them pre-made like that, and I haven't found one that's pre-made that's actual bamboo that's just blank, but I have found one that is, it's basically a printed piece of paper from a calligraphy shop with disconnected bamboo slats, but printed on the paper. So you could buy it and then fill out the slats as if you have the actual slats, but really it's just a printed image. And I haven't tried that because I haven't had to do a scroll for like a Han Dynasty persona yet. So, but it's an option out there. And then this is I don't know. I should cite my thing. But basically this is just showing the format. The image would come first. So the image, that's why I put the image on top. It would be big opening image, and then you would have like a title text, and then you would have the body of the text. Or some of them, it goes like title text, or like actual title, opening image, and then intro, and then body. And so this one, and you can see here the seals on it. This is from an imperial collection. So that's why there's imperial seals on it. So it's showing who owned it. And,
Right,
and this one, and that's why you don't want to go too ham on the red seals. See how there's red seals literally everywhere in the white space? Because this is such an old scroll.
I was like, they love to do that.
And a couple emperors went stamp happy.
Yes.
And like even covered up like actual pictures, like paintings that were hundreds of years old just because they had a big head. And so they just, Yeah, you know, so you don't need to go ham on that. You want either like in the actual text, you want one little thing down here at the bottom, because that probably would have been the actual person who was writing that bit, would have put their stamp there. But then stamps that are all around like the paintings and stuff, that's just like 18th century collectors being like, yeah.
So I was thinking,
Because that's how they keep track of who owned it throughout time, basically. So it's like a pedigree. And here's frames. Here's just saying you can just frame a scroll if you really want to frame it. Just go get some mounting paper and put it in a frame, because that's something that's done all the time. You don't need to mount it a regular way because we're anachronistic here. And then sutras. So here's the sutras. These are some flat sutras. They can be folded like this and then closed. And then sometimes they're even like sewn shut and shoved in a bottle and buried in the ground for good vibes. But then some of them, you know, aren't sewn shut. So sometimes the ones that are sewn shut have like been damaged where the puncture hole was. If you're wondering what those are when you go see them in a museum or something. But yeah, they're basically like either a folding book or they're a scroll. So they can be either a long scroll or a folded book. And they're usually with a lot of gold stuff. This one, it was listed as a Korean one, and it fits stylistically with a lot of Korean ones. But I went back to the museum and they changed it and said it was a Chinese one.
okay.
So they updated their information, and I don't know what made them change, but I trust them because they're the Cleveland Museum of Art, and they have a lot of like actual professional people there, unlike the Met. So yeah, I believe them when they say they have recently found out this is not a Korean scroll, this is Chinese. But yeah, so this would be huge. Like this front part would have been like this much of the scroll. And then the rest of the scroll is just all the rest of that sutra, that volume of the sutra, and it would have been super mega long. So like even when you go to museums, they don't even have the whole thing rolled out, kind of thing. But it looks cool because we like black work in the SEA. So we like doing gold on dark paper. So it's either black, like basically indigo, so dark that it looks black, or a lighter shade. And so I used the sutra style for my first scroll because I was doing a sapphire. So I was like, ooh, blue and gold.
That's awesome.
And so here's another one. This is rolled, and so this is the back side of a Japanese one. So the Japanese one here you can see is much more simplistic in the painting, and it's like a lot smaller. And but this part here with all the cloud painting is basically this portion here. So the back side would have also been indigo paper, and then they only painted the part that would show when it was rolled. And then the rest of it's just blank. And then this one is, I think I boosted the saturation or it came like this, but basically it's using gold, then silver, then gold, then silver. So really flexing up the gold. And then this down here, you can see the use of silver and gold on the dark background. So it's super cool looking. And here's one that's on like a burgundy. This is also a sutra. This is Chinese, Song Dynasty, I believe. And this one has, and these are silks. I believe they would have had like some kind of paper backing, but these are usually still intact because they are silk rather than paper. So this is definitely silk. You can see the weave in there, but again, this is Chinese, and they have a lot more color on it, and then they have border decorations. So another extent that I'll show is someone who was doing an AOA, and they were like, hell yeah, their name is Red, so let's do a red sutra for their AOA. And I was like, wow, that's like Laurel scroll level work for an AOA, but okay, have fun. I mean, it's really good looking. I'll show you. But anyway, so here's the end of it. But they had to like replace the end piece, and that end piece looks like paper to me. And then they just have a simple gold roll. So this is just showing like that there's a little bit of extra that you can have sometimes just to So that way the tail end of your actual work isn't getting rolled up real tiny.
Right.
Fans is another option. This one here in particular is one of those, that micro gold covered one. So it has like the micro gold background and then really tiny poetry / letters. Basically a bunch of scholar dudes just get together sometimes and write poetry on fans. You know, normal bro shit. And so that's an option as well. Most modern fans, like when you splay them open, they have like a thicker spine that like covers the whole area. But like the more period ones I've noticed are thinner. It's just the thin spines, and it's only like maybe in the 7 to 12 spine range rather than like a bunch of little ones.
Yeah.
Japanese fans can be the wood ones that are just fully wood. They don't have this part. But if they have this part, then it should be the thinner spines. So like this here is just like a modern one that you can buy. But you can go to like, they're kind of expensive though to get the good ones that are more period. So these, like this here would probably be like $17. And then as you go up in size, it's probably like $30. And then not including shipping from China. So you could, and then they come, so see how this isn't attached here? They come detachable. And so you basically take that off, flatten it, and then paint on it, let it dry, and then you feed it back in with some glue. You put some glue, thin glue on the spines, feed it back in, glue the ends, bam, there's your fan. So like that's how you should do it. But the cheaper option is usually getting just like pre-made $7 fans off Amazon for the nicer ones, and they're about this big and they're already attached, so you have to work around the folds, which makes it harder. But the calligraphy shops also offer, these are round fans. The calligraphy shops offer these as well. But basically where I said they printed the bamboo sticks just on paper, and then you just do the calligraphy on the printed sticks. They do the same thing for fans. So like you could get like a rectangle sheet of paper with a brownish kind of fan shape, or a fan shape of your color choice. And then it's just because they would preserve fans by removing them from the spines and then mounting them onto a piece of paper historically. And then they would mount it onto a scroll and hang it up for display. And so that's why these are really flat looking in museums, because they were taken off the original fan. But they sell paper like that modernly in calligraphy shops. So you could just get the fan shape and then do it that way. And then same for these. These are from the Met, I think. But basically, one of the emperors who didn't want to do politics just sat in his garden writing couplets on fans. So these would have been on like those paddle fans with a stick and then like the circle shape. And so that's what these are. And then they took them off because he wrote on them and mounted them on like an actual like, they mount them not necessarily on scrolls, they call them albums. So these is something called like a leaf album or something, or a leaflet thing. I can't remember the exact term they use in English. But basically, you could have a collection of just a bunch of different fans that someone put into basically on like a cardstock kind of board. Like it's a thick board that doesn't bend, and you would just stack them all together in a notebook and then bind them. And then you could flip through them and look at the various poetry things. Or you could do it on an actual fan. And then here's the accordion books. These weren't just used for sutras. So you could get this. This is a shop I found because a friend said she got her super bougie Japanese hand-dyed paper there. So these are like, what are they? They say $18.50 for one book, not including shipping. So that's kind of a lot. And they're like this big. And so you'd also have to paint a lot in them, but they are really nice. Or you can get ones that are slightly cheaper from like the Chinese stores, and they have the more, instead of like the modern dyeing kind of aesthetic, they have just generic polyester fabrics as their covers, which looks more period. And you can get them in tall and skinny, short and fat. They can be this long, they can be this long. So yeah, they're called orihan in Japanese, which just means folded book. Yeah, or you could do stone rubbing style. You could imitate wall murals, you could imitate Buddhist mantra style, which I did recently, and then another friend does chigiri style, which is like taking paper and ripping it, and then making it into basically like a collage kind of thing, and then like making it all one piece of paper, and then writing on it. So basically, your paper is your art format, and then you just slap the text on, which kind of makes it easy, and it kind of saves you on illumination. But if you want to go approach it from a more hybrid style, you could do stuff like this. I include this because these are like the scroll work in tombs from earlier period, where you could just take like a Bristol, and instead of like having a European style border, you could use scroll work from tombs to like make a border, and then just do it in English. So there's like 5 million options, and people choose hat hand every time. So here's the stone version of that mantra. I think it's a mantra, not a sutra. But yeah, so like they have this everywhere in Japan, apparently. This is Nishigori's slide again. I don't really know what he was trying to say. Anyways, SCA examples. So like my friend Sugen literally had a slab of rock and then painted on the slab of rock. But her kingdom does blanks, like just a ton of blanks, and they don't actually like commission scrolls per person. So she just was like, she's just trying to get her like art out by doing blanks. So she doesn't have a text to go with this one, but she literally painted on a slab, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Because it was imitating a tomb mural that was on rock. So
that's so cool.
So I was like, you can do that if you want. And then this is my friend's AOA from Eldemir, and she's a mixed person herself, Chinese and I'm assuming Norse or Norwegian, because her other persona is she made her persona, or they made their persona both. And so when they did their scroll, they had the tongue lady on the side, and then they did it with Norse roots. So
that's neat.
Because they were trying
so
to
random.
I know it's so random, but you know
it works for the person.
Yeah.
it's their persona.
That's great.
And they're really out there, so you know whatever they want. So here's pictures of me converting that hanging scroll into a sutra kind of style scroll. So much cat hair, but but I just had like some polyester stretchy-ish cotton that I used as the cover part, and so I basically had to peel back that front rod and then line it and then roll it back and glue it down to put the thing in. And my brother made that little wood thing for me and as the latch. But anyway, because I wet mounted this, because I didn't have time to get in the silicone backing stuff, this is it before I wet mounted it.
Yeah.
But you can see, I think in the background of this one, see how much it's smeared?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was because I wasn't able to turn it over and then wet mount it from that side. I had to wet mount it to the area facing upward and then place it. And so then I had to you have to shimmy it out so it's all flat, no air bubbles. And that happened. So basically what I did to save it was a thin wash of gold sparkles.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, this is fine. And yeah. It's learning. Yeah, it was my first scroll, so you know. And so I just made it super short, and I just I ordered the blue paper, and then I cut it out based on the size of the hanging scroll I was working with. And I also did a wash on the brocade because it was a white brocade, so I just took gold acrylic, watered it down, and then just like a slightly goldish. It worked. It works beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I think it's really pretty. And then here's the one that recently went out that I did based off of a Japanese mandala. That's the word. Mandala. And so I had another hanging scroll, and this time I just painted directly on it but the originals would have been silk. And then Here's the AOA I was talking about. He
On red.
on the red.
Wow.
He literally hand mounted this whole thing. And so this is all wet mounted. And then he did the calligraphy. He carved seals for the king and queen, which I mean I did too, but on linoleum, not wood.
Mhm.
And then he made this whole thing just for anyway for a guy named Hero because Hero means red.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
It's like the best AOAs.
Yes.
And then here's Nishigori's work. He's got really good handwriting.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And then he did the painting below and then he self-mounted it as well with just some mounting paper. And then here is, so on the left is a laurel scroll for a Tang Dynasty poem. And the lady who does these, I try not to feel bad. She's like a professional illustrator and that's her day job. So
I was like, those are amazing.
I try not to feel bad, but but like this one's done in Chinese, and I think these two are done in that square script hack hand.
Yeah.
So like they're just very blocky, and like you wouldn't be able to read them. Like you look at them and you're like, oh no, I can read that, and you're like, wait a minute. And so it's just, I don't know. I feel like if you're making something in a language someone can't read anyway, why don't you just do it in that language or make it readable is kind of my thought. So yeah, and I can't remember whose scroll this is. I don't think it's another Oyan's, but they were in the same kingdom. But this one is a baronial red raven or Sung Young-soo by the same lady. I'm glad for the laurel scrolls they at least got a translation.
Yeah.
Here's Nishigori's ANS project. I believe he had this at Pensick, or I can't remember. He had it at one of the major war events as well. But so he did this all from hand. He made sure he got the strip here at the top this time, because if you saw his previous one, it was all the same fabric. But in this one, he had the block. He blocked it out, and then you're supposed to have like a different fabric here, and then the two strips here, and then the flies at the top. And then he carved this as well, and then did the calligraphy and the painting. It's just. And then here's what I did for Mako, who he was technically an Okinawan persona, but he basically got discouraged, he said, because he didn't know how to do the research on it. And so he just joined his Norse buddies. But he was like, man, this might convince me to go back. I was like, okay, here you go. So I just bought a blank sutra book or a folding book like that. And then all I did was the calligraphy and then carved a linoleum stamp. A stamp out of linoleum for our barony, basically. And then I did another one for Inabe, but don't at me. I actually put her name backwards. I put it Yasue Inabe instead of Inabe Yasue. But she said it was okay, and I didn't redo it. She's like, I love it how it is. I'm like, okay, cool. But I noticed that only when I was teaching this class the other day, and I was like, wait a minute, that says Yasue Inabe. Oh well. So. Yeah, so it's just kind of easy, and if you just keep these on hand, you can just kind of whip it out, and that's what I've started doing.
Yeah, those are awesome.
Come on.
It's like, no. You're done.
Please.
Okay.
There we go.
Was there just a blank in the middle? Maybe there's a blank slide. So here's some Baron Foro scrolls. He did the war fan on the left and this fan here. I think in like early 2010s-ish, before I even joined the SEA, so, but not that far back, you know? And then here is Sung Young-soo's Laurel Scroll on the left. They got a translation for the classical Chinese, and they just did it in classical Chinese, but they, and that same artist lady did the illustration, but Oyoung did the calligraphy. But it looks a little typefonty, but it's not as bad as some I've seen.
Yeah.
And then the fan in the middle, she commissioned me for her laurel ceremony, and I put a Korean poem about this I forget what I mean. I think it was like a seasonal poem about like new beginnings or something cheesy. I don't know. But I can't remember if it was that one or if it was by this guy who got assassinated because he was in the coup of the Goryeo Joseon takeover. But he was a really good poet, so he had like all those like super depressing like poetic like things, and so but I think he had one about new beginnings. So, but I think it was that guy's poem. But yeah, and then on the right is another Baron Foro scroll where he had really good handwriting. He was getting better and better as he went. And the left is another one by Foro. Yeah, all three of these are by Baron Foro. And then in the middle is his kind of signet scroll that he did in the sutra style. And I took a lot of info for that. I tried to grab the text from it, but it didn't quite make sense because he was also learning how to speak Middle Chinese, and so he was like the go-to person to get a scroll translation, and so that's why his passing is kind of a big loss. But you can see over here, it's got really good cursive handwriting too. And so like on the left was like his earlier stuff. But anyway, and this here is a Hangul sutra that my friend Suyun started to do. Before her cat like spilled the thing of water over it. And again, she makes them as a blank because her kingdom doesn't do commissions, so she's going to leave the text thing blank, and then she left slots for where the name needs to go blank. One on the right, I forget what kingdom that is, but literally they just did it they just did a really cool dragon, and then put their arms down in the corner, and then put bonsai in kanji. And so like, you don't have to go all out to get it right. Yep, there we go. Usually like when I teach this, they're in the chat like posting links, helping me out. Or like if I have a question, I'll be like, hey, Nishikori, this is your slide. Go. But
Things happen. Just good. Just osmosis. Yes.
Do you want me to go over anything, go back or anything? Or
Sorry, could you explain the mounting again? Like because I'm not a scribe, so I have no idea like what wet mounting actually is.
yes, I didn't know if I should elaborate on it because I didn't know how much time we had, but wait. No, there's this one. So, okay, there. So basically, you have your artwork, and it's on paper or on silk, sized silk, and you put it upside down on your table, and then you get these strips of the silk brocade, and then I wonder if he's got a link that I have saved somewhere. But basically, you're cutting out all those pieces of let's see if I've got the finished product. Because this part here is his process for that ANS one I showed you. So like in this one, he just took the main picture and then took the same silk fabric, but had two side strips and then the top strip, and then okay, no, I got rewind. So painting down, upside down, you have a thicker piece of like paper, raw paper, unsized, untreated, doesn't need to be bleached or anything. Then you would soak your painting and then with a brush, and then you would lay down the backing paper and then like not stipple, what's the word? Basically you're working it down so there's no bubbles. Then you let that dry, and then the next day you come back, you cut it out with a knife, peel it up, turn it over, and then you would do the same with the silk. And then you would get the silk wet, completely. And so you'd have it flipped over now, and then you would place, I think you do the sides first, and then you would do, so you would do sides, top with like that other color. This one, so like you would do these two pieces separately, and then this piece, then this piece, I think. Either that or you do this first, and then you do these two, and then you do this and this. And then once that's all done, then you flip it back over, and then you get a long piece, and then you apply the whole backing, and then you flip it over and you apply the whole backing, or the whole front piece. And that's when you incorporate in the rod at the top and the bottom. So it's a lot of steps.
Yeah, I was just like, it's
Wonderful.
complicated.
Don't try to do it.
Right. And
Or shouldn't
then
try to do it
right.
if you're not
And let me see, I think
familiar.
the Met actually, or no, the British Museum. Nope, let me touch my plus button. Thank you. Okay. Go back. So we got like 8 minutes. So to YouTube. Because this is like really cool, and I do want to like ANS project this one day, but hey, don't judge my K-pop
I would
recommendation. This one here is pretty good. The voiceover is not that great, but if you just watch the lady talk or watch the lady do it, it's pretty great. So like these are the scraping tools, the burnishing tools, and that's the paste. I don't like the voiceover because the voiceover A, butchers all the Chinese names, and B, they kind of disregard what the lady's saying.
Of course they do.
Because they're the British Museum.
Yeah,
So like, because she's talking in English in this video. She's just got a bit of a heavy accent, but she's talking in English. So they do a voiceover of the lady talking in English.
Oh my
And
god.
I'm just like,
Your captions.
and I'm just like, you
It's like,
assholes. So, okay, so let's,
Russia tested the ink to check
but,
safety and whatnot.
yeah, they have this like
In this case,
white girl basically explain what she's saying, even though she's talking in English. So she rolls it out, you know, we've got, this is like the backing bit. And let me just put it on,
rushed.
You just mute it.
yeah, just, the information's useless anyway. Speed it up though. And so basically, because they had pictures of her doing this process. And that's how you would remount a scroll too. You basically just soak it. You soak it, then you can just peel everything off and then remount it fresh. So like that's why when you're looking at things in like Chinese museums or Asian museums that are scroll mounted, you don't know how long it's been in that specific mounting. And they don't redo it often if there's like a lot of like text added over time, but you can, if you need to preserve it, fully remount it like they're doing here. Like they had this modern Chinese artist's paintings that hadn't been mounted yet, and so they brought in this expert lady who's just going so fast. And so like once that's a drying method there is to, once you've done a layer, you slap it on a flat wall
Of course.
and you let it dry flat, and then in the morning you just X-Acto knife it out.
Okay.
And she looks very pissed.
I know, she
That's
does.
not what she has to do there.
She's like,
She's just like, I'm here to do my job, and what is this
Okay,
lady
so
talking about? So this is her getting it all wet. She's like, evenly at least. But basically, you could do the same thing, but with other options as well. So we've applied the backing, like, so she's done the front pieces and applied the back now to hold it all together. And they just stuck it on this wall, and then you take your flat like letter opener knife, and then you peel it off, or an X-Acto knife if you want to cut it out. So much flattening.
I was just like, this
Much-
would drive me insane.
much
Yeah,
flat.
she's getting the holes out, right?
Yeah, oh my god,
Yeah.
I would get so angry.
Traditional art.
Look at her, that like side eye that just
I know,
happened. when
I know.
the girls
I
were
watch
talking,
this
she
because I
was
love
like-
watching how expertly she does it, but I don't care at all. So this is her like custom cutting a piece of wood for the rod. I'm like, so this is all too much. And like putting in the wires to hang it, and then getting the silk on that, and then setting it, and yeah, she's a pro. And then putting a fancy on. And then stringing it, and then bam, yay. Oh, that one's huge, so.
Yeah, those are ginormous.
Yeah. And then, like I said, Blue Heron Arts has another good one. Let's go back to that search real quick, because that one's decent. The Blue Heron Art, he does his stuff is all in English, so that's fun. This is the Japanese documentary that Nishigori got a lot of his information from. And then I like cross-referencing, so we'll turn this one on. But I don't know how much time we have left. Who's in here right
We
now?
have 3 minutes, so.
Yeah, so I'm
I
gonna,
was like, we should probably.
so yeah, if we skip all this junk, basically he does it for a living. Here we go. Here we go.
Watch this probably before.
Yeah, he looks familiar.
But here you can see, it's going really fast. Let me go to the part where, so there's like the original art with just like the backing, and then you like measure out how much you need, and it's just speed version. And see here he's got each of the silk pieces of backing paper as well. So it's, and then you like use that to kind of merge it together. You fold the ends so there's some crisp. And yeah, so this is a good video too. If you wanted to actually get into it. So okay, so it is the top two pieces first, and then the side, and then the big broader piece, and then last piece. You do that. But yeah, so like he's got a whole studio, and then like, see, he's also got the plasterboard in the back where you can just flat dry. He's like ironing it and everything. That's too much. Too much.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll end up there.
I was gonna say, they're all like.
Hey,
ready to
we
get in
started
here.
3 minutes late, so we're good.
Yeah. Like, it's fine. It is.
Okay,
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
yeah, and then.